All right, we're going to take a page of notes today called one-step equation. This is something that you covered last year, and we're going to go over it again this year as we build upon it and get into harder and harder problems. Essential question for today: what is the golden rule to solving equations? What is the golden rule to solving equations? So go ahead and here, let's go ahead and write down the word equations. You know something is an equation if it has an equal sign. So that equal sign there, that's going to tell us that we're dealing with an equation and how to solve it. And equations are really just two sides, two things on each side that are equal to each other. They just don't look equal. So we're going to kind of start with some concrete examples. We're going to build, and hopefully we can understand equations a little bit better. So let's look here at some samples. So we know that 3 equals 3. That's an equation, has an equal sign. And does 3 equal 3? Yes. 3 does equal 3, so that's true. Does 5 equal 5? Yes. 5 does equal 5. That's true. But then you can also say 2 plus 4. Does 2 plus 4 equal 6? Yes. Those look like two different things, but in reality, 2 plus 4 is in fact 6, and 6 does equal 6, so that's yes. So they might not look exactly the same, but this equal sign here means, go ahead and write this down, they are the same. It means they are the same. They don't look the same necessarily, but they are the same. And we know they're the same because of the equal sign in math. That tells us that they are equal. So let's look at an example here. And we're going to create an equation going backwards. So I'm going to start with the answer. So here we're going to start with the answer. So let's say x equals 3. So some number is 3. I know that number has to be 3 because 3 equals 3. Can't be any other number. That number is 3. Now, this is where we start. Now we're going to go ahead and right here. We're going to add 2. So let me go ahead and add 2 here. And let me add 2 here. So I added 2 to both sides. Now, we have to do it to both sides because here is the golden rule in solving equations. What you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other. Go and write that down. The golden rule. What you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other. What you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other. So if we added 2 to one side, we must add 2 to the other side. What you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other side. Now, this side here, let me draw a line down the middle. The reason we draw a line down the middle is because it splits this equation into two sides, the left side and the right side. Now, these two sides are equal. We know they're equal because there's an equal sign in the middle. Now, this side, the left side, x plus 2, I can't combine those. I can't combine variables and numbers, what are called constants. I can't combine them. So I'm just going to leave that as x plus 2 equals, I can combine these because these are just numbers. 3 plus 2 is 5. So this is my equation. Here's my equation. X plus 2 equals 5. X plus 2 equals 5. So that's how you can create an equation. Now let's solve an equation. Let's solve an equation. So let's call this number 1, first equation we're going to solve. And we're actually going to solve this equation we just made. So go ahead and rewrite it. X plus 2 equals 5. And we're actually going to do the same thing every time we solve equations. We're going to draw a line down our equal sign. That's going to split it up, remember, into the left side and the right side of our equation. Left side and right side of our equation. So we split it up. And the question is, how do I solve this? Well, I know when I created my equation, I went from here and then I added 2 to get down here to the equation. So if I want to go backwards, I'm going to start with the equation, and instead of adding 2, I'm going to go backwards, and the backwards or the opposite or the math word would be the inverse is I'm going to subtract 2. Subtract 2. So I'm going to subtract 2. But remember the golden rule. What I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other side. Now, we have to look what's happening to x. X is being added by 2. We did that. We added 2 here. So to go backwards to the answer, I have to get rid of adding 2. And the way to get rid of adding 2 is to subtract 2. But if I subtract 2 here, I have to subtract 2 here. Now, the reason I did that is because 2 minus 2, I'm going backwards, and I'm left with just that x again. So x equals, and then over here, 5 minus 2 is 3. And so my answer is 3. We already knew that answer. Sorry, we already knew that answer. And so we can see there that we just had to go backwards. So let's write here. Here's the trick to solving. Trick to solving. We're going to use what's called the X is method. X is method. Now, the X is method is you first identify which side has the variable. So go and write that down. Identify which side has the variable. Is it the left side or the right side? Left side or right side? Once you identify which side has the variable, then we need to figure out what is happening to, I'm going to put X, but it could be any variable, A, B, Z, Y, it could be any variable. We're just going to call it X because most commonly we use an X for the variable. So we got to figure out what side the variable is on, figure out what's happening to that variable, what's happening to X. Once we figure out what's happening, we're going to do the opposite operation. Do the opposite operation. So you would have to know what the opposite operations are. So here they are. The opposite of adding. If you see adding, the opposite that you should be doing is subtraction. Go and write that down. If you see adding, the opposite you should be doing is subtracting. If you see subtracting, the opposite that you should be doing is adding. Go and write that down. If you see multiplying, the opposite that you should be doing is dividing. Go and write that down. And then the opposite of dividing would be multiplying. Write those down. So the opposite of adding is subtracting. Opposite of subtracting is adding. Opposite of multiplying is dividing. Opposite of dividing is multiplying. So this is that X is method. We're going to identify which side the variable is on, figure out what's happening to X, and then do the opposite. So let's do some practice here. Let me shrink these so that way a couple more problems on here. All right, number 2 here. You can put it underneath if you need to go to a new page, or on the side if you have room on the side. Number 2, let's do X minus 4 equals 2. X minus 4 equals 2. First thing we're going to do, draw a line down the equal sign, split it up into 2 sides. Identify step point number one here. Identify which side has the variable. Well, the variable is over here. This is going to be on my left side. So there's the variable. I'm going to highlight it so that way you can see it. Now, number two, figure out what is happening to x. What's happening to x is we are, and here on the side here, we're going to write our x is table. This is a little x is table. So we can figure out what's happening to x. X is being subtracted by 4. I see that there. It's being subtracted by 4. So the opposite of subtracting by 4 would be adding 4. Adding 4. And this is what I'm going to do to both sides. I'm going to add 4 because it's the opposite. It's the inverse. It's going to cancel out. And that's going to give me my answer. I have x left over here. I'm going to bring it down. But if I add 4 to the left side, I have to add 4 to the right side. And 2 plus 4 is 6. And so my answer is x equals 6. Identify what side the variable is on, figure out what's happening, and then do the opposite. Let's try here. 7 equals x plus 5. 7 equals x plus 5. I'm going to write that down. We're going to draw an equal sign. Line down the equal sign. We're going to make our x is table. All right, now this time, if we look, my variable is on the right side of the equation. It's over here on this side. That's fine. I had to figure out what's happening to x now. X is being added by 5. I can see here it's being added by 5. So I need to now do the opposite. Well, the opposite of adding is subtracting. So I'm going to subtract the same number, 5. So instead of adding 5, I'm doing the opposite, which is subtracting 5. But if I do to one side, I have to do it to the other side. These cancel out. So I have x equals, and 7 minus 5 is 2. 7 minus 5 is 2. Check your answers there. X equals 2. All right. So not only can you do adding, subtracting, you can also do multiplying. So go ahead and write this one down. 5x equals 30. 5x equals 30. Now draw your line down the equal sign. Now the variable I can see here, it's on the left-hand side. So I'm going to write left. I'm going to make my x is table. Now this tells me, now you have to know what this means. There is an invisible multiplying dot here in between a number and a letter. This means multiplying. Whenever you see a number and letter together, that means multiply. So right now I'm multiplying by 5. And if I look here, what's the opposite of multiplying by 5? It would be to divide. So I'm going to divide by 5. Golden rule, what I do to one side, I do to the other. Here's how we show division. You're going to make it look like a fraction because remember, fraction is division. So we're going to divide by 5, divide by 5. And these turn into 1. So this is technically a 1x. But since it's a 1, we don't have to write the 1. It's implied, it's invisible. So we could erase it and just have x. And 30 divided by 5 is 6. So x equals 6. X equals 6. Number 5. Let's do this one here. Let's do 28 equals 7x. 28 equals 7x. Go ahead and write that down. Draw your line down the equal sign. So this time, the variable is on my right side. I'm going to highlight it. And I'm going to do my x is. And this time x, remember this is multiplying. X is being multiplied by 7. Multiplied by 7. So what's the opposite of multiplying by 7? Divide by 7. Divide by 7. Divide by 7. X equals. And 28 divided by 7 is 4. Good. Let's do one last one here. Number 6. A little bit tricky one. X over 3 equals 8. Go ahead and write that down. X over 3 equals 8. X over 3 equals 8. Draw your line down your equal sign. So there's my line down the equal sign. Now my variable is on the left-hand side. Here it is. I'm going to highlight it. You can circle it if you want to. Now, what is happening to x here? X is, and if we look here, there's a fraction. Remember, fractions mean to, go ahead and write this down. This means that you're dividing. So right now, I'm dividing by 3. A fraction means division. I'm dividing by 3. What's the opposite of dividing by 3? I'm going to multiply by 3. So I'm going to multiply by 3, multiply by 3. When that happens, these 3's cancel. They turn into a 1. But remember, we don't have to write the 1. So x equals, and then 8 times 3 is 24. 24. Good. We're going to work on some practice problems. The reflection question, what is the golden rule to solving equations? The golden rule to solving equations is, go ahead and write down what the golden rule is. Good. What you do to one side, you must do to the other. Good. And those are going to conclude our notes for today.